Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2022 Legislative Forums, sponsored by the Chamber and a few other folks, and we thank those people. And thank you for attending today's event. As you can see, it's in a webinar format, so only the elected officials and sponsors are going to be on the screen. Questions for today's meeting were sent by registered attendees for the forum. There should be time for questions to be taken from the audience at the end of the prepared questions. If you have a question, please use the chat feature. The next public Talk with Officials event will take place at the Chamber office and again virtually on Saturday, February 26th, again at 10:30 till noon. Registrations are required and in-person registration is limited. Please register through the Chamber's website at uniquelyurbandale.com. As mentioned, we have sponsors for these forums, and all members have an opportunity to sponsor the forums as a benefit of membership in the Chamber. John Smith of Iowa Realty is the presenting sponsor for all of the forums throughout the year. John, would you like to make a comment or two to the crowd here?
Just glad everybody could come in this morning. The market's looking like we're probably going to see higher prices again this year. The interest rates are going up, and so it's going to be a good time to start thinking about what you want to do for the year. So if I can help you out, let me know. Otherwise, appreciate you coming in here this morning. Listen to us.
Thank you, John. Thanks for all you do. We also have a member sponsoring this January forum, University of Iowa Hospitals. Christian Benzo would you like to say a few words to our group?
Sure. First of all, I apologize. I can't stay on long. I have a basketball game to go to this morning, but yeah, the University of Iowa Hospitals and Clinics are always happy to sponsor events and participate and be, active in the communities. And I think, as 2022 goes on, and I know that we've had some changes within our hospital leadership, but I think you're going to see more active participation from us as a hospital system and working with the local hospital systems here in Des Moines. Obviously we do with COVID and, the PEDS perspective, but I think there's going to be some more initiative for closer collaboration to take care of Iowans. So we're super excited. So thank you.
Well, thank you for sponsoring and good luck with your game today.
Thank you.
We expect at least 30 points.
Well, I'm not playing. My 8-year-old is playing, but I do have to take my 1-year-old with me. So that makes it always super interesting.
Well, super good. Good luck twice then.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lastly, we have Mark Anderson of Anderson Properties as a sponsor today, and I think Mark's with us. Mark, would you like to make a comment or two?
Certainly would. Thanks, EJ. And I'm Mark Anderson, as EJ said, with Anderson Properties. We're proud to sponsor this January forum. The reason we're behind this is just because I think it's always been a great program for the Urbandale community and others that are involved. And, it's discussions like this between the officials and the community that makes community better. And that's what we're all about. We help build communities. So I thank everybody. I thank the panelists and all those who are listening in and participating today. If you want to learn more about Anderson Properties, you can simply check us out at theandersoncompanies.com. With that, I'll turn it back over to EJ, and thank you for allowing us to sponsor today. We're proud to be here.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Well, let's get started. We're going to start with the 2-minute opener for each of the elected officials. And I'm not sure who all's on. Brad, are you there?
Yes, I am.
All right. Why don't you open up? Tell us a little bit about yourself in the session. I think you're kind of the senior member, I think. So probably everybody knows you well, but reacquaint yourself.
Well, my name is Brad Zahn. I'm elected District Number 20, represent Urbandale, Johnston, Grimes. I am chairman of the Judiciary Committee, on the Education Committee, and it was recently added to the Ways and Means Committee for this year. And just really excited to be here. I thank Mark Anderson and John and all of our sponsors. It's an honor to be with all of you, and I'm looking forward to the questions. Obviously, we've got off to a really big start with the leadership of our governor. She's made a lot of different, she's been very aggressive this year. And so we've got a lot of work ahead of us, a lot of debate ahead of us, I'm sure. And so I'm excited to take all the questions. And EJ, thank you for what you've done. I appreciate you hosting this, and Tiffany and the chamber as well.
Thank you. John Forbes, are you there?
I'm here.
Good. Good morning.
Good morning.
Tell us about it.
Well, we've been 3 weeks into this session now. It's hard to believe. We're probably about 20% of the way through, and we've gotten real busy in committees right now. A lot of subcommittees are going on, running different bills through the both chambers. We haven't yet had any floor debate on bills yet, but I would suspect that's probably coming maybe next week. So things will start getting into some more evening legislation and debating bills. So this year I pretty much serve on the same committees. I'm back on transportation. I serve also on human resources and on the appropriations committee. And I'm also the ranking member on the Health and Human Services Budget Subcommittee, which oversees our state Medicaid funding here in the state of Iowa. So we're working on those budgets right now, trying to make sure that we can provide adequate funding to all the vital services for people here in the state of Iowa. And I look forward to the questions we're going to have here in the next few minutes.
Super. Thank you, John. Eddie, I think there you are. Few comments?
Sure. I would be the freshman member of this group. The one thing that I've been surprised about is that there's a fairly steep learning curve. If you want to do this right, there's so much to learn. But I'm still on the same committees that I've always been on: Commerce, Human Resources, Public Safety, Veterans Affairs, and then the HHS appropriations or the budget subcommittee. And we've had an extremely full slate over the first 3 weeks, pretty much dawn to dusk. We've been talking about lowering our taxes, strengthening our education, and just a host of things that I'm excited about. We've been addressing mental health, and as you guys know, that's my passion. And so there's a lot of things that I'm excited about this session, and I look forward to hearing from you guys.
Thank you, Eddie. One thing you might do is tell us your geographic district that you represent.
Well, I represent the absolute best district in the state of Iowa. That's right now it's 39, which is Johnston, Grimes, portion of Urbandale, of course, which is why I'm here. And the new maps will be slightly different, but as of right now, that's who I represent.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
And
you.
Bob Brownell. Good morning.
Yeah. Morning. Thanks, EJ. I'm Robert Brownell, and I represent Clive, Windsor Heights, Urbandale, Grimes, Johnston, Polk City, all points east. Urbandale, of course, when I'm on Urbandale's calls, along with the mayor, is my favorite town. You can see I even have my Urbandale flag out there front and center. So yeah, I knew Bob would like that. A lot of things going on with the Board of Supervisors right now, and probably the most important thing we're doing right now is figuring out how to spend $95 million worth of ARPA money that we have. We're one of the largest recipients of ARPA money, and it was fairly consistent with Omaha and Douglas County, so pretty similar populations. So those came out to be about roughly the same, a little bit more over there than here. We compare ourselves with them a lot. So some that's been spent. We've got 4 different buckets we're looking at. We'll get into that later. I won't waste your time with that now, but we've got 4 different buckets we're looking at. If you're not part of, if your organization or your cause isn't one of those buckets, don't worry. That doesn't mean, like food insecurity, for example, is not one of those buckets. That doesn't mean we're walking away from food insecurity. It's just, it would be handled a different way. I personally have been working a lot with Afghan refugees. That's going okay. We've got 600 last time I checked, which is probably over a week ago. We had 600 refugees in Iowa. 500 of those are Des Moines Metro. So the bulk are coming here, and which is good. Kind of bad in a way because the 3 resettlement agencies are just overwhelmed with getting people into their homes or into new homes, more permanent housing, and getting them set up with all the things you need because they come here with nothing basically. So that's been an interesting piece. We're doing this on Zoom right now because the chamber board has a policy of over 15% positivity. We have to go virtual. Right now, the county is running according to CDC, about 32% positivity. Our public health division says more like 29%. So still pretty high. But that takes it from the mid 30s per public health just a few days ago to 29% today. And our average daily cases are plunging also, which they're still too high, don't get me wrong. But at least we're going the right direction. So it seems to be we're on the right side of this thing is going the right direction. So a lot of stuff going on in the county, and we work closely with our cities, particularly Urbandale, and a lot of stuff going on. And I'll be anxious to weigh in on things that come up as we go along here. Thanks, EJ.
Thank you, Bob. Mayor Andewig.
Morning, EJ.
Few comments, please. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. And thanks for being here. Thanks for our hosts and for the Urbandale Chamber for hosting us. Actually, I'm at City Hall right now. We are in the middle of our budget session this morning. We had scheduled a budget session. We started at 8 o'clock this morning. We'll be going until 5 o'clock tonight. So I stepped away for this, and hopefully my council doesn't make any bad decisions while I'm sitting in here doing this. But we, in all seriousness, we've started, and the budget that our staff has presented is a very good budget. We anticipate lowering our levy this year again, and some very good news, and largely attributable to local option sales tax. That since we have been able to collect that, we've been very responsible in that. The first year that we got it was a half year. We've paid off about $2 million of our bonds. Last year we paid off another $6.42 million of our bonds, and this year we anticipate reducing our bond by almost $8 million. And so we are essentially applying those local option sales tax dollars to our debt, which is a great result. And actually, it means a permanent reduction for our budget on our debt service levy. Hopefully, we can almost eliminate our debt service levy in time and pretty much go pay as you go on a lot of things. So very optimistic budget and trying to reduce that interest cost and reduce the total cost to our taxpayer. We just had a presentation. We've gotten through just a few things, but just before I got in here, had a presentation by our police department on their budget. And one thing I want to announce, and we're talking again about a lot bit about mental health on here. And just one thing that's our chief is very excited about, and I'm very excited about, is we're going to be looking at a crisis intervention team addition to our police department. He just came from a meeting yesterday with some West Side police departments. Waukee is actually going to start this as a pilot program with Dallas County Mental Health this year. And so Waukee will be the first department to implement this. And then we hope that Urbandale will be one of the second cities to be able to do that. So it's going to be about a year out from where we are on this thing, but we are very excited that we can implement a crisis intervention team to deal with some of those chronic mental health cases that we have that our police department has to respond to. So some good news there. I'll keep you in touch as the details come out on that. But again, happy to be here. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mayor. Did you remind the council before you left the room of the mayor's veto power, just in case?
Yes, I did.
Oh, good. Appreciate it. Catherine, as chairman of the Education Board, we'd like to hear from you.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been on the board for 6 years. 4 of those, including this year, I've been the president. I'm a lifelong educator personally with degrees in English education. During that time, I was Bob Andewig's sophomore English teacher. And and then I have a counseling degree and I have a library science degree. As far as the school board goes, we have 3 new members out of our 7 that were elected in November. We also have a wonderful new superintendent, Dr. Dacca. And I think most of you have already visited with her because she's been doing a listening tour to basically familiarize herself with our environment. She comes from Wisconsin. Other big news, we have currently begun the construction on the other new elementary. And Bob Andeweg was talking about debt service. We've been fortunate enough to, due to property tax increases because of valuations. Thank you, John Smith, for sponsoring this and bringing that up. We've been fortunate enough to move up the second elementary 2 years so that we essentially are serving a generation of students that we might not have been able to had we had to stick with our original timeline. I also want to thank Kristen, Go Hawks, University Hospitals, and Mark Anderson for joining and sponsoring this. I want to say this is my 5th school district that I've been in, and Metro, and this is a remarkably effective. I always learn a lot from all the rest of you, and I want to emphasize again, as I have in the past, that everyone here is interwoven, and everything that each of us does affects the others, just like a ripple in a pond. And so I always learn a lot during these sessions. So, and I'm grateful to Tiffany and her staff for setting this up every year. It's really a gift to the city. And I'm done.
Thank you, Catherine. Appreciate it. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you.
First question. Let's start with Brad, if I may. Governor Reynolds has proposed a flat 4% flat tax income tax rate. Economists have stated that this proposal would reduce taxes for taxpayers with higher incomes and increase taxes for those of lower incomes. Do you support the proposal? If you do support the plan to raise, if you do support the plan, do you intend on raising state sales tax or cutting services to make up for the estimated $2 billion of revenue that will be decreased by the proposed cut? Brad?
Thank you, EJ. First of all, that is not true. Everyone will see a tax reduction. I don't know where that came from. Right now, we're in the position of we have $1 billion in our reserves and our emergency funds. We've got $1 billion in surplus for the fiscal year we just finished, and it's projected we'll have $1 billion in this fiscal year that would be the end of July. It's not known exactly where we're going to fall. The governor came out with a 4% flat tax. It does not include raising the sales tax. The Senate Republicans came out with their own plan, which they're talking about a little bit less flat tax. And I think we need to have a conversation. The Senate Republicans want to have a conversation in regards to the tax credits that are out there. It's really unknown where we're going to be at. I do not support raising the sales tax. It's not in the plan. Nowhere in the plan is it raising the sales tax. But you know, we're sitting on several $1 billion, and it's my belief that it needs to be returned to the taxpayers, the people that send that money into our treasury. So I'm very supportive of any efforts to lower our income tax, and I just can't commit on where we're going to end up at. 4%, obviously, I support the plan that eventually gets us to no income tax in the state of Iowa, because I believe that would be a great attraction for a lot of people. The other thing that's a really huge component of this is the elimination on retirement pensions, IRAs, 401ks. I know many seniors that go to a non-taxing state, such as Florida or Texas, and Tennessee just joined because of our tax environment on pensions. And it's my belief that we lose a lot of great talent and when they do go to those states. So I'm really excited about this, and to say that it raises taxes on low income is not true. It'd be a tax reduction for everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. John Forbes. John?
Yeah, there's a lot of talk at the Capitol about lowering income tax here in the state of Iowa. You know, I'm in favor of doing that if we do it in a fair way that all Iowans can have an impact on their bottom line. The way that the bill is written, the higher income earners in the state of Iowa are going to get a larger chunk than the middle class and lower middle class people. So I like to say, you know, for John Forbes and his wife Cindy, this is a great bill. You know, I can see a big savings in my tax bill every year, but the average Iowan is not going to see that big of a change in money coming back in their pockets. The majority of the money comes to the people, or the high income earners, who tend to get more benefit from this bill. This bill will take about $1.6 billion when fully implemented out of our state revenue that comes in on a yearly basis. So again, we have we operate on about an $8 to $9 billion a year budget. So you can do the math. It's, you know, close to 20% reduction in income that's coming into the state of Iowa. And the question is, how do we account for that less money that's coming in? Iowa doesn't have tourism dollars like Florida. Iowa doesn't have oil money dollars like Texas. So my concern is, where are we going to make up that, you know, $1.6 to $2 billion per year to be able to provide vital services to people here in the state of Iowa, like education, like you know, healthcare. What could happen is a lot of that will be switched over to property taxes. People will most likely see their property taxes go up because there'll be less money for the state to give to cities and counties to be able to have them, you know, run their county and city budgets. So most likely, property tax voters are going to take a big hit on this in the long range. The other issue is, you know, we've got a lot of money right now in the state of Iowa. Since the pandemic started, Iowa's brought in $9.2 billion from the federal government from pandemic relief. And I think we have to really take that into consideration too. Why we're looking very well is because a lot of this money is coming in from the federal government, and that's not going to continue to happen. And so I think we got to be very careful to make sure that we don't take too big a bite out of the apple here, like what happened a few years back in the state of Kansas. If you recall, they lowered their taxes drastically there, and it ended up being a big disaster, and they had to go back in and recalculate taxes there. So I'm not against a tax cut, but I think we need to look at this very carefully and make sure that we don't put the state of Iowa in a situation where we cannot provide services for our citizens here.
Thank you, John. Eddie, you're up next. You want to address that question, please?
Thank you, Jay. And I forgot to mention in my opening comments, thanks to you and John and Mark and Christian and Tiffany. So thank you for doing this in the Urbandale Chamber. Yes, I fully support lowering of taxes. I've made some proposals along the way. I think we have to address when people leave the states. And usually that happens when they're fresh out of college, they get a job offer, they move somewhere else. Or when they're a senior and they're looking at their options and they decide, you know what, I was a little bit too high of a tax state, so I'm going to go elsewhere. They want to protect their assets, right? And I think what this does is it addresses both of those needs. And to the point about sales taxes, increasing sales taxes, if more of those people stay, then that's one more reason why we don't have to raise our sales taxes. Keep in mind that nothing is in, this is not, we're not done with this proposal, right? So discussions are going on among with the Senate, discussions are going on what the House and what the governor's plan, and we're kind of seeing what works and running all the numbers. We have to give a shout out to the Republican controlled chambers before I was here even. And over the last dozen years or so, they've really been responsible with the state's money. I mean, we would not even be talking about this had they not taken good, solid steps and managed the money well over the last decade. And so now that we are in this position of being a fairly state in fairly good stewardship, we can talk about these issues. One thing I do want to say, though, is even though we're not, it's not the number that we're that's most important. The most important thing is that we have a surplus and we're trying to get it back to the Iowa taxpayers. Another thing, though, this didn't just come up because we had $9 billion of federal money over the last year. Remember, a year ago, in the previous fiscal year, we had been projecting Iowa to have a $500 million surplus. That was during COVID. And even after COVID, that year, we had a $300 million surplus. Then added to now where we have $1.24 billion surplus. It's not just because of federal funds, it's because of good management in our state. And I think we can do that responsibly. And that's why we're taking a little bit of time to look at all the numbers to make sure we can do this. But it is time to give money back to the citizens who actually run the state.
Thank you, Eddie. Obviously, this question is directed to legislators, but I think it would be helpful to get the perspective from the folks that are more or at the local level, such as the supervisor and the mayor and president of the board of education. So, Bob, any observations?
Well, we don't collect income taxes at the county level, but we do collect property taxes, and there will be a levy decrease this year, it appears. Polk County, our illustrious daily newspaper reported a $70 million surplus down here at Polk County. I know you'll find it hard to believe, but that's not exactly accurate. We have to hold about 52 million as a 25% reserves that maintains our AAA bond rating. But there is a surplus, not 70 million. There is a surplus though, and enough of one that we can give a property tax levy decrease. There's other proposals to focus it on, certain groups. I think the best way to do it without creating winners and losers is to make a general application. I think my Democrat colleagues agree with that. So that'll be a good tax relief piece coming from the county. The other piece is on mental health. The state's part of the state's plan that we supported, by the way, on mental health is also resulting in a property tax decrease for taxpayers here in Polk County, about 38 cents. And so I think we'll probably be well over 50 cents worth of property tax relief here in Polk County between the county and the state takeover mental health. I think John makes a good point that, services are important. The biggest problem we have right now within the mental health sphere is not so much providing services or good quality services. We can do that. It's the shortage of labor and shortage of staff to do it. And all the solutions are long-term solutions, which we can get into later if you want to. But it really, I think that what we have set up in the mental health piece right now seems to be working well, better than the old version anyway. And so we've got good services here. Glad to hear that Urbandale is going to start a crisis intervention piece of their own. That's great. We're also adding a mental health expert in all 3 dispatch centers across the metro. So that'll help too. So we're taking mental health seriously here, but our biggest obstacle right now is staff, and not so much how do you pay for it. We got money to pay for it. It's just where do you find the staff to work it. So that's our perspective on it, I think.
Thanks, Bob. Mayor Antewig, your observations.
Well, again, as I said, we're right in the middle of our budget right now and working through that, and I think we can we will have a levy reduction this year. But with where we are with the state, one component that we do need to factor into our budget that's very real from the state standpoint is the elimination of the backfill for the commercial rollback. I mean, there was a commercial property tax rollback that was backfilled by the legislature, which is being phased out. And so that needs to be implemented as part of our budget as well. So that's a very real impact from a state standpoint that we need to factor into our budget. But again, we are working, I think, overall with resources that we have, very fiscally responsible to do that, and especially with the implementation, as I said, from the local option sales tax. Our continued goal is to reduce our debt service levies by as much as we can. So hopefully that, just like paying off your mortgage early, if you can eliminate that interest cost, that's a permanent savings to our city budget.
Thank you. And Catherine?
Well, first I'd start off with, I'm obviously of an age. And so a lot of my friends do live outside the state. And I can tell you that it isn't an income issue, it's a weather issue. So if you could change the weather, you could probably retain those people. The other thing that I would posit is keeping the retired people in the state. I understand for tax purposes. The bottom line is I have a deep concern, selfishly, for retaining staff in our schools. The next 4 to 5 years are going to be pretty touch and go as far as staffing. And so I think that's broad based. And I think for the state's well-being, rather than looking at taxes, I think we need to, retired people aren't working. So we need to focus on labor shortages, and particularly in my case, trying to keep our schools open and staffed. I would say that if people are lucky enough to have pensions and retirement income, there might be bigger needs, would be my take. I guess I'll quit there.
Yeah, thank you very much. Next question. John, you want to start this off? How will you fund public education? And incidentally, I read these questions as they're submitted, okay? How will you fund public education with a regressive flat tax? Politicians for years have said that they won't fund recurring expenses with one-time income streams. Our schools have been underfunded for years and really need a boost, especially in the rural areas. The flat tax won't bring in revenue that our current system does. With the transfer of public funds to private schools, the problem is compounded. John?
Yeah, that's a concern I have, like when I was talking a little bit, when you take 1.6 billion out of a budget of 9 billion, you've got to cut somewhere. And unfortunately, education could be part of that area that gets cut. We've got to provide the vital services. We've got to provide Medicaid, which accounts for, well, first of all, let me go back. Education in the state of Iowa accounts for about 56% of our total budget, give or take a percent or two. So if you take 1.6 billion out of it, education is going to take a hit somewhere. Right now, per pupil spending in the United States, Iowa ranks, the last time I heard, is 39th out of 50 states. So we're pretty close to the bottom 20% for funding per pupil per student. Right now, I think the estimate is somewhere around $7,700 per year per student. And I could be a little off on that. Catherine might have a little bit more closer numbers, but I think that's pretty close to the number. And so with that, it's going to be very difficult to provide the education if we don't have the dollars there to help teachers, make sure teachers' salaries are competitive with other states. We're losing teachers to other states because Iowa's lower than average teacher payments for yearly services they provide to school districts. So it's going to be difficult. And so we're going to have to look at that very closely and try to make sure that, we fund public education here in the state of Iowa. That includes the community colleges and the 3 Regents universities too. That, we've seen we've had some reductions to the Regents universities, which has increased tuition costs to kids going to college. So I just can't get the math to work in my mind, how we can do provide all these services when you take about 20% of your budget away. And, we've got to provide those vital services, just even like providing public safety, kind of getting off here a little bit, but I serve on transportation, but we have a real shortage of highway patrol people on the roads at night. And if we start cutting budgets, that'll get the cut too. And, you may be in a car accident somewhere in the state of Iowa on a night, and we only have maybe 4 or 5 highway patrolmen patrolling the whole state of Iowa sometimes for the whole state. And you may wait an hour before somebody gets there to help you, sometimes from the state side. And that hour may be the difference between you surviving a crash or not. So people need to take that into consideration when we talk about tax cuts and how it's going to affect the lives of people here in the state of Iowa.
Thank you, John. Eddie, you're next.
Okay, well, I didn't get all of the question, but it talked about education and how we can fund it effectively, if I remember correctly.
Would you like me to read it? I can read it again.
Sure.
It's up
Either
to
way.
you. How will you fund public education with a regressive tax? Politicians have for years said they won't fund recurring expenses with one-time income streams. Our schools have been underfunded for years and really need a boost, especially in the rural areas. The flat tax won't bring in the revenue that our current system does. With the transfer of public funds to private schools, the problem is compounded.
Okay, well, I sorry about that. I don't know if you guys can see me here, but I'm getting a call here. It's messing me up here. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, sorry about that. I think one of the key points in the question, and then to what one of my colleagues suggested, is that yes, we do have, it is a significant part of our budget, but a key point that people are missing is that we now have a surplus. And so if we, if we have a surplus, that means we have money left over from whatever we've done. And to Representative Ford's point, he's correct. We spend 56 cents out of every dollar on education. 48 cents of that, 48 cents goes straight to K-12, and roughly 8 cents goes to higher education, regional university, community colleges, and so on and so forth. And I think we have to be careful. And I really am truly, this is not a political statement or anything like that, but I really am trying to figure out why we are spending 56 cents out of every dollar. And many people are saying, well, that's not enough. And so I'm really trying to dig into the numbers and look into, if there are ways that we can better spend it, or if there's a distribution issue. Said another way, while the state puts in $7,200 roughly per student, once you add in property taxes, once you add in federal funds, that's $17,000 a student. $17,000 a student. So that's a lot of money. So we need to figure out why $17,000 a student isn't enough. And I really want to know that answer. And so I'm looking into that figure. And once I figure that out, I'll let everybody know. But education is important to us, and we need to make sure that everyone is educated properly.
Thank you. Bob Brownell, you comment?
Well, I've been doing this long enough to know a placeholder when I see one, and I think the governor's put a number out on the table. The Senate Republicans have another number, another idea on the table. I don't think anybody in their right mind is going to create a bill or a law that loses $1 billion a year, maybe the state of Kansas, but beyond that, I'm not sure that that's going to happen here. We know we've got a budget of 7.3 billion. I think last time I looked, we're not going to suddenly go to 6.3 billion, for example. So I think this is open to negotiation. I think that's what this is about, and there'll be a plan put together that makes sense. So that's all I'll say about it. Thanks.
Thank you. Bob Anawig, Mayor.
I don't have anything further to add on that one.
Okay. Catherine?
Well, of course, I have something to add.
Good.
Okay. 92% of the students in this state attend public schools. Okay. And that has remained fairly stable over the course of the years. I would also point out that we in the public school system have also been given a great deal of money for pandemic relief. We have used those ESSER funds for a number of issues. The commonality for all those investments has been that they cannot be recurring. They can't be long running because the aid is not permanent. And so I have a very difficult time understanding if we got 9.2 billion, that's more than the year's budget. That didn't have an impact on the surplus is ludicrous. And so again, I would point out, you have to make some very clear plans for how are you going to backfill that? I can't quite come up with it either. The other thing that I would point out is, again, I was in education for 41 years, most of it here in Iowa. The education formula is extremely complex, but back in the day, right after we had one-room schools and started consolidating, the state itself determined that in an effort to provide an equitable education for every student, no matter the property tax valuations in their districts, the decision was made to funnel that money through the state so that every kid got as equal a chance at a good education as possible. Now, I worked for a while in Nebraska. Theirs was strictly based on property taxes. So when you get into the wealthy suburbs of Omaha, they were awesome. You go to downtown Omaha, not so much. Okay, so that was a solution. So when you say 56% of our state income, that's because of the way we have tried to make equal opportunities for every student, including, for example, the Afghan refugees who aren't providing any property taxes at this point in time. We as a state have determined that we will value each student. And so what I would say is I would welcome more money, of course. I don't understand not funding the schools when we know they're going to be understaffed anyway. And some of the other issues that I'm sure we'll get into, state legislators denigrating these sinister agendas, all of that combined with a lack of funding is sending a message to our people that we don't value you. And so of course they're going to move out of state or they're going to quit. It's all a package. And again, I would posit that a tax cut would be a recurring expense on the back of, and I can't tell you what the impact of that 9.2 billion is, but I don't think you can, the people at the state level can tell me either, because it's all a puzzle and there's always consequences for things that you don't realize at the time. So thanks for the time.
Thank you, Catherine.
Mhm.
Brad? Your
I'm
turn.
very excited to answer these questions. Thank you. First of all, the sky is not falling like everyone wants, or some of these participants or the panelists think that's going on. I'm so glad that John is in a high income tax bracket. Every participant that's part of this meeting today, it's my job to give you and open up the opportunities to be a high income earner. In regards to say that it's regressive, that's not true. If you make more money, you buy more products. And that's how this is how this plan works. In regards to one-time money, the governor has the ability to fund different programs. It was just announced yesterday that she's going to fund the program for the recreational waterways here in Polk County, $15 million. She is using all this money for one-time expenses. I agree with what's said by my good friend John Forbes, is that it's not a good idea to use that kind of money. There will be triggers in place. Everybody always wants to talk about Kansas. The story about Kansas is at that time they didn't have triggers there. But at the time when they did pass that, oil, the barrel of oil, which they depend on oil in the state, just plummeted. And then the grain prices for wheat down there, the commodity prices plunged at the same time. So it was a terrible, perfect storm. Why are we in the position we are right now? Well, there's several reasons why the revenues are high. One is farm income is as high as it's probably as I can ever recall. Their commodity prices are very high right now. And so there's a lot of farm income. I know we live here in Des Moines, in the suburbs, but we're really dependent on farm income. The other thing that's happened is we decided to tax internet sales several years ago. And with the pandemic, we could not believe how much was generated, which was only fair to the Main Street businesses that are out there. And then the third thing, we had no idea how much money the sports gambling was going to bring in. So our revenues are at the record amount that they are right now. And so in regards to school funding, it's correct. Our board president said that they did get a huge amount from the COVID money out of DC. That was $1 billion extra up and beyond what we appropriated for the schools in the state of Iowa. I said, I think it was last session when we were talking about school funding, and by the way, to the Urbandale School Board and the superintendent that's on this, that's a participant, we will have your SSA number out by the time that we're supposed to. And we might be debating that next week, but we're very close to getting that out. So you'll be able to plan accordingly. I said on the Senate floor, I can't remember who it was, it might have been Senator Celsey. Tell me how much money would satisfy our schools. Just give me a number. No one could give me a number that. We give about 60% of our budget to education in the state of Iowa. How much is enough? We have a lot of other priorities that we do. We've been talking about mental health, which we do not a very good job. We're trying to plow money into that. Even though we're talking about lowering income taxes, I'm not going to support that as long as we make sure we put more money into mental health. State patrol. Yes, we have a problem with state patrol. The problem is we're trying to fill those positions. We are appropriating that money to get new positions. And Senator or Representative Forbes is right. He's wrong. There's not 4 patrolmen in the state of Iowa, but there is 4, unfortunately, at times where in the districts that are broken up, that there's only 4 patrolmen out there. And when we have a huge snow event, it is a problem. And finally, it was brought up about something that I've been very involved in, and that's the inappropriate material that's being taught to our kids in our schools, including Urbandale. And let me just tell you what this inappropriate material is. They don't want to talk about this. And quite frankly, I get a lot of emails on this, and I can't even reply to the email with the graphic illustrations that are part of this material. The material that they have that they don't want to talk about is several different disgusting instances. One is an adult having sexual relations with a child. Number 2 is a cousin molesting his other cousin in an overnight. And number 3 is an older brother molesting his sister. That's disgusting. I'd rather you all in education focus a little bit more on teaching our kids the tools they need once they get out, that'd be math, science, and et cetera, that they be more productive in society. So I'm not going to let that go down, and I will fight till the very end to get rid of this porn. Thank you.
Brad, may I ask you what that had to do with the budget question?
You brought it up about the sinister, whatever it is, and that's what you brought it up, and I'd ask you the same question. What did that have to do? You brought up, and I'm not going to let you liberals put out all this false information.
Brad, you seem very angry.
I'm not angry. I'm tired of you all giving out misinformation, and I'm going to fight for the parents, and I'm going to continue to fight for the parents. And if there's anyone that thinks that this is appropriate to be taught in our schools, please let me know, because I do get a few emails in regards to that. But I want everyone to know, because it is inappropriate what's in those books that you all are using for your classrooms. I am mad. I'm mad because it disgusts me as a parent.
Brad, we've all agreed to have a civil discussion and not call names, and not, for example, like you did last year, telling me that I was afraid because I wasn't at the meeting because my daughter was getting chemo. Please calm it down and be civil.
You know what? I'm just fighting for the parents, and I'll continue to do that. And you brought
Not all parents, Brad. Everybody has an opinion.
You know what?
Right.
Let's go back. EJ,
Senator,
take control.
Senator, why don't everybody's expressed their opinion on that issue, so let's move on. Appreciate it. As a matter of fact, the next question, I hesitate asking it, but I will. Eddie, why don't you start this off? It's a two-fold question, and I think it's probably not as relevant as it might have been yesterday, but I'll ask it. Should we threaten jail for school teachers and librarians for teaching or keeping books in libraries that represent certain students and families, but others find offensive? The related question is, what do you propose to help recruit and retain K-12 teachers in the current education workforce shortage? Eddie, it's your turn.
Well, let me just address the first one last. I do like some of the proposals that the governor has proposed and some of our colleagues have proposed, including $1,000 bonus retention for teachers. And let me just say, we love teachers. I mean, I'm a product of public schools, but I am for 100% all of the above options and strengthening every last option for parents. We took advantage of that for our families. I mean, my two older kids, my older girls, all public schools, but my boy, that was a little bit of a challenge. It didn't quite work for him, so we were glad there are other options for him. He did eventually graduate from Johnston, but we're glad that there were other options out there, and I'm for all of the above options for parents in terms of education. In terms of what was discussed just briefly, just moments ago, and the question directly, you gotta look back at this. We have R-rated movies. There are certain things that are just not, even if you enjoy that content, it's not age appropriate. The examples that Brad Zahn just mentioned, cousins sucking each other's private parts as part of a required curriculum, a stepdad masturbating in front and with his stepdaughter. Come on, are you kidding? Is that age appropriate for our children? Whether or not that's what you want to do and teach your kids, that's not the school's role to teach that and take over the moral authority that is against so many parents. And in terms of what should we do about it, I don't think anybody's talking about jailing. I don't think that's going to pass. But I think what the sentiment is that decision should be left to the parents, and the school should be looking at teaching our children the basics of how they can be successful, not teaching a moral argument. And yes, some people have mentioned that. I don't think that's, that's for the legislature to decide. I think what parents are telling me, the bigger sentiment is that parents are telling me and telling all of our legislatures that the moral decisions should be left to the parents and not the schools, in direct opposition of most of the parents.
Thank you. Bob Brownell, you want to touch this?
Much as I enjoy falling on my sword, I think I'll pass on this and let other folks comment.
All right, thank you. Mayor?
No, thanks.
Okay. I have a feeling, Catherine, you have a comment.
I may.
Go ahead.
First, I'll point out, none of these materials are required in any course. And so-
Yes, they are. Before I
Wait
don't
a
mean to
minute.
interrupt, but that is
Eddie,
correct.
Excuse me, Eddie.
Eddie, please, let Catherine
No,
speak. Please.
they're not. None of those volumes are required in any course. How do you know that? How do I know that? Because I work there. And I'm the president of the board. And that's part of what's kind of bothering me about this whole thing. People typically are extremely fond of their kids' teachers. They're extremely fond of their local schools. The majority of our teachers and our staff are doing everything they possibly can to keep our students in school. If you remember a year ago, that was the issue. We have bent over backwards to keep our schools open and to do our best to try to bring students back to a better state of mental health, to take care of them, and to try to bring them up to where they should be as far as their learning. I'd like to point out that we have gone through every 100-year pandemic that we've never had before. And so from my perception, everyone is doing the best that they can. A lot of parents are saying, we don't know what's in the curriculum. We don't know what's in the library. Those are wide open. All you have to do is look on your courseware for your student. All you have to do is look on your school catalog in your library. It's all wide open, and it has been for years. And so when people say, I want more transparency, just like you, Brad, I'm asking, what more could we do? And, worst case, you don't want your kid reading a book, call the teacher and say, I don't want this. And they will happily provide you with an alternative if that's how you feel. And that has always been the case. And so I'm not sure exactly what's behind this. I would invite people to read those books. Most of them are autobiographical, and they're things that we don't really want to happen to anyone. And so you're perfectly free to have your kid not read those. Some of it is disturbing. I would acknowledge that. However, having those books available and having people be able to tell their stories, we have a lot of kids, I'm sorry, but we have a lot of kids who are in less than ideal life conditions. And do I want to know all about that? No, but as a counselor in a school, I did. It's heartbreaking. And so, at this point, I would invite you to read the books and live their stories if you can get a hold of them. The surest way to encourage everyone to read a book is to ban it. And you can look historically. You can't get a hold of those books now. Can't get them in the library. If you notice, let's see, what was the one that was just banned? Oh, Mouse, the story of the Holocaust. Because the Tennessee school banned it, right now it's on the top sellers on Amazon. You can hardly get a copy. So I would posit that if you really want to keep your kids from things you don't want them to know, that you take away their cell phone. You take away any electronic devices, and you don't let them hang out with their friends. Because honestly, And we have conditions in our country that are not stellar for kids. It's hard to grow up now. If you want to keep them from those influences, then you do that. But I can tell you that the wrongs in our society and the heartbreaking things for our kids are not coming from library books. Thanks.
Thank you, Catherine. Brad? would you
Well,
like to address it?
thank you, EJ. It's a good question. I get fired up and, I think that Eddie Andrews said it perfectly. I think it's a parent's decision to make. I don't think it's appropriate that the schools, it's not their role to do this. Listen, I'm married to a former Des Moines Public Schools teacher. I love teachers. We have the best teachers in the United States here in Iowa. I'm hopeful that we could reward them. I know there's conversations about some kind of liability protection for teachers because they are put in a terrible position. I know that it isn't just urban, it's going on in rural Iowa where teachers are really in a bad position and can't defend themselves. And I'm not saying physically, but the way everything's set up, we want to do more for teachers. It's not about teachers. And I don't want to put any teacher in jail. I can tell you that the bill that's going to come out this coming week, there's negotiations going on with the governor that's really going to pretty much more highlight allowing parents to weigh in on this issue, that if they want their kids to give them the ability to say, no, I don't want you to expose my children to this repulsive autobiographies, whatever you want to call them. They just shouldn't be in our schools. I'm not interested in burning books. I'm not quite sure what happened in the state, the Tennessee or whatever you mentioned. But it's really about parents is what it's about. Allowing parents to have more input. And what's happened is during COVID, obviously all the kids were doing online learning and a lot of parents were tuning in. And it really opened up a lot of eyes. And so we're really trying to put parents in a position where they have the opportunity to say what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. John?
I'll
You
be
there?
brief, but first of all, these books are not required curriculum in the state of Iowa. The Iowa Board of Education does not require these in curriculum. They're in the libraries so that students, if they want to check these books out, they can. I feel as though it's a parent's choice to make a decision on this. And let's leave it up to parents and let's leave it up to local school boards to make those decisions instead of 150 legislators down at the state capitol here in Des Moines making those decisions. I've always been a big proponent of local control. Let the people in the communities, in the districts, make those decisions what are best for their kids. As for the education funding, we need to pay our teachers more money. We're 39th in the country, like I said, in education spending. And we have some school districts in the state of Iowa, more in the rural, that starting teachers at $33,000 a year. That's just barely above the poverty line. So we need to really focus on getting reimbursing and paying teachers a fair amount, because what teachers have been put through over the past 2 or 3 years, with the pandemic now and all these crazy things kids are doing to teachers with TikTok and all that stuff. I'm surprised that we don't have more teachers retiring from this profession at this time. I talked to a lot of them here in my pharmacy, and they're very frustrated and they don't see the support. Then you see a state senator come out with these crazy comments about wanting to put teachers in jail. That's not going to bode well for people wanting to stay in this profession, and especially young people who are thinking about being teachers. When they see and hear these things, it's going to turn them away from the profession. So we've got to turn this around and really help Iowa become, again, a leader in education through K through 12, all the way up to our regions universities.
Thank you, John. One observation I might make, I always, when I come to these, I always look at the register before I leave the house. There's an article this morning, and I think that question about jailing, the jailing teachers is probably, as Senator Whitford said, off the table, but I won't comment beyond that, but that may not be relevant any longer. Anyway, I'm going to move to another question and go back to the legislators.
Is it, EJ, is it possible that I can respond just a little bit to a couple of comments on that question? I'll just be very brief. I just like to address
assuming very brief, Eddie, go ahead.
Thank you so much, EJ. The question about, I've heard a couple of times from my colleagues that this is just books in libraries, and it may be in the Urbandale libraries. But remember, I personally represent a number of school districts, and that is not true. These are required books in many cases. It's not just sitting in the library, where even then it may not be age appropriate for everyone. But there are some that are required for the first semester and then optional after the second semester. So I just wanted to point that out, that is not always the case, even in the Metro Des Moines area. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move to another subject, if you don't mind. There are long waiting lists for most of Iowa's Medicaid home and community-based services waivers, and the direct support workforce shortage has become even a larger crisis during the pandemic. The workforce shortage is preventing individuals who do have access to home and community-based services waiver from receiving the assistance of daily living needed to ensure their health, safety, and well-being. What is currently being considered in terms of appropriations to expand access to individualized home and community-based waiver services and to assist home and community-based providers, including people who hire their own support staff, through participating in the consumer choice opinion option and consumer directed attendant care programs in the recruitment and retention of reliable workforce needed to deliver those services? I think that's a legislative question. And so, Brad, would you like to start with it?
Well, first of all, there's no doubt there is a workforce shortage. I hear from the providers. And one bill that I do have, because a lot of times these are not high income jobs, is that we eliminate income tax on the people that are in that industry, which I think would help with the workforce shortage. In regards to the appropriations, I'm not sure where we're at. I'm not on the appropriations. John might be able to weigh in on that a little bit more. I would just say this, is if anybody is having any problems, please email me, because I have gotten involved in several cases before. It seems like it's settled down a little bit in regards to people that are trying to get into the new system. If there's a new person that's trying to get into the system. I think the providers, it's settled down in regards to them getting paid, because I'm not hearing from the providers. But listen, I've never been a supporter of the MCOs, never have, and but it's reality, and I've just tried to make the best out of it and help out individuals as certain situations come up. Thank you.
John?
Yeah, it is a big problem here in the state of Iowa, and I think across the whole country. We're seeing a huge shortage of workers in this area because these aren't glamorous jobs. Taking care of a intellectually disabled individual is a very, very tough job. And unfortunately, we don't pay those people well enough to be able to do these very tough jobs. Many of these people can go and work at a McDonald's and make $15 an hour. And they're working at in these homes and situations where they're only getting maybe $12 to $14 an hour. Last legislative session, we did appropriate more money to bring some of the wages up in some of these areas. And I've spoken to a couple directors where they are just very grateful, and they were able to raise salaries to some of their workers by $2 an hour, which, you know, got them from $13 an hour to $15 an hour, which is still, when you look at the numbers, is fairly close to the poverty level. So many of these people are having to work, you know, they work a 40-hour job, and then they're having to work another 10 to 15 hours during the weekends or during the week to be able to make ends meet. So we need to really focus on making sure that we can provide adequate services to our disabled people in the state of Iowa. And unfortunately, some of these companies that provide these services are on the brink of going out of business. Some of the nursing homes here in the state of Iowa, they're having a difficult time, and they're struggling because of low reimbursement rates for patients within our state Medicaid program. And, you know, unfortunately, they have to shift those costs to the private pay patients here in the state of Iowa. And it's becoming more and more difficult for them to be able to stay in business and provide these services. So we're looking at new funding dollars to be able to bring people up to a livable wage, so they'll may want to stay in this profession and not go to work at a McDonald's or another fast food chain that'll pay about the same wage.
Thank you, John. Eddie?
Thank you. You know what, EJ, I think we have a question in which all three of us are aligned.
Good.
So I have the privilege of serving on the Health and Human Services Subcommittee, the Budget Committee for that addresses this issue with John Forbes, Representative Forbes, excuse me. And he's right. We did increase some of the funding for that area. And I think it's important that Iowans understand that education and healthcare is where we spend our money in Iowa. Like everything else is dwarfed by that. We've already talked about education being 56 cents out of every dollar that comes in the state. And please don't quote me on this exact number here, but it's roughly 30 cents. And maybe John can tell me what that is, but I believe it's roughly 30 cents that is spent on healthcare and Medicaid. So by the time you get to everything else, you're at roughly 86 cents. Again, give or take a few cents. I'm sure somebody will try to fact check that number. It's out there somewhere. But the biggest sentiment is that there's a lot of money spent on those. And quite honestly, it's gonna take just spending money to help that segment. If you take tours, we took a tour together of Woodward and some of the other healthcare facilities around the state, and oh my goodness, we just have to do a better job at that. And that's one area that we can agree on, and we're talking already about how we can get those resources together. So stay tuned.
Thank you. Bob Brownell, do you want to comment?
Yeah, this probably is one of the top concerns of the Board of Supervisors, is this workforce shortage having to do with Medicaid and developmentally disabled people and mental health issues. We've got great providers here that have, at best case, are not taking any new clients. That's best case. What we see more often is these providers, I'm talking to the Link Associates of the world and others like them, that provide key services for disabled folks, Medicaid folks, is suspending services completely for people that are already getting the services. We're seeing that more often than not. So what do we do about that? Well, we can't do it alone, but there are some things that we can do and have done. One of them is we're considering, under one of our initiatives, is to people that get into this business, get into this kind of work. If they come out of school with loans, maybe they stay at their job long enough, we'll forgive the loans. We'll take the loans for them, and that's something that has met with some pretty good response. Another one are bonuses that can go to workers that are providing these services. That's been somewhat effective, and I got to say, I think the governor's office is, at least my experience with them, is that they're pretty tuned in on this. especially the workforce issues. So that's part of it. The other part that we've done, and these tend to be kind of long game kind of solutions, but one thing we've done here lately with Drake is partner with Pharmacy College. And I think I talked to John about this earlier, but partner with Pharmacy College to allow an education, a master's education, to allow psychologists to write script, not just psychiatrists. And because the number of psychiatrists in the state are very small, and psychologists can do that with proper licensing and education. They can do that. Drake would be one of 5 schools in the United States that provides this kind of education. We partner with them financially to do that, and those are some things we can do locally to help the workforce issues within that kind of sphere of Medicaid and developmentally disabled services, mental health services. We can't do it alone, obviously, but I'm optimistic that we'll get there. It's going to take a while because a lot of these things just don't pan out immediately. That's another thing we're working on is working with the K-12 folks to make this kind of occupation more of a attractive option for folks that want to be in that field. I mean, how do we get people in the pipeline? Really, right now there's none. So or very few at least. So that's a part of it that we can do. I think that'll help the situation. So a lot of it tends to be long-term solutions. That doesn't solve the problem tomorrow. Some of it's a little shorter term, like loan forgiveness and bonuses. But even that it doesn't turn the switch. There's no switch that turns and makes us better. But I'm optimistic. Like I said, the governor's office is tuned in on this pretty well, and they seem to be pretty active. And we're happy to work with them. But it's definitely a problem, and we see it on the front lines every day.
Thank you, Bob. Mayor Anawig, do you have a comment?
Just a quick comment. This doesn't directly affect the city standpoint, but I certainly see it from UCAN and from some of our communities, that this has a real impact on our community. And I think we're all in tune on this. That something needs to improve here, and I certainly stand by to support whatever could be done. So because it certainly does affect our residents as well. So.
All right, thank you. Catherine?
Nope, for a change, nothing.
I'm disappointed. We're toward the end. We've got a few more minutes. If I'm not mistaken, about 8 minutes. We could go on for another hour, but I got a couple of quick questions that I'd address to the legislators and ask that you respond briefly. The first one is the Convention of States is a movement that is gathering momentum across the nation. I'd like to know from each of you if they support this in Iowa. Also, can you comment on your position? Eddie, you want to start that?
You said be brief. I am still gathering the information.
All right. That's good. I like brief. John?
At this point, I don't support that, especially after what happened at the state capitol this week with one of my colleagues. Many of you probably saw that in the media. So at this point, I'm not in support of the Convention of States.
Okay. And Brad?
I'm supportive. We keep sending people to Washington, D.C., both Democrats and Republicans. It's broken. People are making a career out of that place. They're absolutely bankrupting our next generations. So I'm supportive.
The other three of you, do you want to comment? If someone does, please feel free to do so.
I'm not always successful, but I try to comment intelligently, and I wouldn't be able to on this topic. I just don't have enough information on it yet.
Oh, I find that hard to believe, Bob. I really do. To the legislators, have you had the opportunity to read the DOJ report on their investigation of Woodward and Glenwood resource centers? If you do, share your thoughts if you have on the findings and recommendations. I'm not familiar with it, so Brad, you want to address that?
I've heard about it, but I haven't read it.
All right, thank you, John.
Been a little bit involved with that. I've toured both facilities, both in Glenwood and Woodward. Of course, Glenwood was the problem. Right now, our Kelly Garcia is head of Department of Health and Human Services here in the state of Iowa. We're working on a settlement right now It's going to be in the millions of dollars. It's going to cost the state of Iowa. And so right now we're trying to, that's the unknown factor. We've got a budget for this fine that we're going to receive. And so right now that's where we're at. We don't know what DOJ is going to fine the state for those violations that occurred in Glenwood here 2 to 3 years ago.
Okay, thank you, John. Eddie?
Right, and I've been on, like I said, I've served on the same subcommittee with Representative Forbes, and we've done some tours across states. And we've listened to a couple of presentations from Director Garcia. We're looking at that. And once we get all the information, everyone will know at the same time, effectively. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Hate to rush folks, but I promised we'd be done by noon. So wind up. Brad, would you like to start off? Or excuse me, I'm sorry. Did any of the other three of you want to comment on that? That issue? Okay, Brad, you want to wind it up for us?
Yeah,
Start.
thank you so much for everybody being online and being a participant. Thank you, EJ and Best Chamber Executive Tiff, for putting this on, and the panelists that are here. We might not agree all the time, but certainly respect everyone that's a panelist, because it's a tough job that we're all doing, and it's an honor for me to be represent Urbandale as well as the other communities. You know, the sky is not falling in the state of Iowa. We are in a great position financially because of some good decisions we've made in the past. And I'm really encouraged about what the future of Iowa looks like. One thing we didn't get a chance to talk about is school choice. That's something that I think that we will pass some kind of legislation, giving parents the option to pick whatever the best educational opportunity is for their kids, not based on a zip code. And I've seen lives changed. And so I'm really excited about that. And I look forward to anybody who wants to email me or call me. I'm a little behind with my emails right now, but I have returned all my phone calls. So if you need to get a hold of me, please do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. John?
Well, since Brad brought up school choice and vouchers and things like that, we probably will see a bill this session. People have to realize what impact that's going to have on K through 12 education in the state of Iowa. Right now, we have about 485 to 500,000 kids in K through 12, and about, I think, around 30 to 35,000 in private schools, parochial schools. What'll happen is, the proposal is 70% of the per pupil the money that goes per student, which is about $5,400, is going to go into an account that then parents will be able to access to send their kids to a private school. The issue last year was why it didn't get through is because not enough money was being channeled to the rural schools here in the state of Iowa. So I think the bill that you're going to see is going to probably channel more money, the other 30% that is given, going more to rural. And by doing that, they're going to get the votes in the House and the Senate on the Republican side to be able to pass this bill. As you know, most of the Republican legislators come from the rural areas of the state of Iowa. So it's pretty obvious why they wrote the bill that way, to get the votes to pass it. So urban school districts are going to take a hit on this, unfortunately. So if you live in an urban area, public schools are probably going to be shortchanged a little bit if you're in the urban areas, and more of it's going to go towards rural. So just be aware of that when that bill comes out. This is what I've been kind of told. I haven't seen the bill yet, but I think that that's going to be part of the way they're going to get it through this year. Other than that, I've been working on legislation. Brad and I have worked on an expansion of medical cannabis here in the state of Iowa. Hopefully we can get a bill through that will expand that, and a few other things, but I want to thank everybody for being on the call today, and sorry it took a little extra time.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Eddie?
Thank you again, EJ and Tiffany and John and Christian and Mark, and everyone else who's been associated with this Urbandale Chamber of Commerce forum. thank you for the opportunity to talk to the constituents in this area. First of all, it's an honor to serve and to answer all of your questions. I just like to end by saying, yes, school choice will likely come up. I support all kinds of all the above options. I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. I think we can strengthen our traditional public schools while giving parents additional options. I assumed that they were going to have a question or two about mental health, so I didn't bring that up in my opening comments. I'll know better next time. One of the things that I'm proud of is that we are opening another psychiatric residency at the University of Iowa. We're trying to address mental health from both an immediate concern, like our mobile crisis units, which we did strengthen, and to our medium and then our long term. And this will certainly bring more psychiatrists and more people to address our mental health on a long-term basis. We've been working to, we've been having extracurricular meetings with our different hospitals to get a very complex issue of bed tracking together so that will streamline access and will reduce the stress and waiting periods on parents. And then also, I'm certainly supportive of anything that's going to return taxpayer money as long as we do it responsibly, and that's why we're taking so long to get this together. So hopefully over the next week or so, we have those numbers to you and keep Iowa moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Robert Brownell, comment, Mr. Supervisor.
Yeah, thanks to everybody for being on the call, and thanks to the chamber and EJ and all the sponsors for being part of this. As Brad said, we don't always agree, but we've got so many creative people working on so many solutions to our issues here. And I just got to say, I want to end this on an optimistic note, at least my part of it, which is what a great metro we live in. It's just terrific, and we've got so many things going for us. And you know, all the problems we have, they are problems for sure, and they seem nettlesome, they seem problematic, obviously, or they wouldn't be problems. But they don't seem like things we can't solve. So I feel like our hands get around these things, we can solve these problems. It may take some time, but we'll get there. We've conquered a lot of things in the past. We've made a really great metro here. So we should be really lucky and feel lucky and grateful to be here in the first place. I take my cues from our Afghan refugees, many of whom are there here with no shoes, just sandals, no blankets, no coats or anything like that. You think they'd be hopeless. They're not. They're very optimistic. They're happy to be here. They're thrilled to be here. So we should take a note from their note, take a page in their notebook, and be grateful too that you know, things are going to get better. Things are going to get better, and they'll get better quickly if we just work at it. So we can disagree, it's fine. We can disagree civilly, but let's keep working on solutions. Thanks, EJ. That's all I have.
Thank you, Bob. Mayor Anawig, comment, please.
Sure. Thank you, EJ. Thanks again to our sponsors, and thank you, EJ, for moderating this, and to Tiffany for the chamber for hosting this as well. Again, thanks again. You know, we, as I said at the beginning, we are in our budget session today. We started at 8 o'clock. We have 41 separate line items of our budget to get through, and in 2.5 hours before I started this forum, we went through 4 of them. So I don't know how many they've gone through since I've been in here, but I think we have a long day ahead, and we are, you know, to the extent we don't get done by 5 o'clock today, we're going to continue this. But that just gives you an idea of how much detail we go into on our budget. You know, we, between 2 years ago from the election 2 years ago, we have 3 new council members. From 2 years ago, 2 new council members now. So there are some good questions that come up, and you know, I'm proud and honored to start my 5th term as mayor. And I think I provide some of that perspective as far as where we've been and where we're headed to as well for some of the newer council members. So we're working hard here. I appreciate everybody's support and a lot of good questions today, and we look forward to answering questions in the future. So feel free to call me if you ever have a question on a city matter.
Thank you, Mayor. Catherine?
Yeah, I just want to point out, I'm very proud of my former student, Mayor Andeweg. You did good. Quick thing on vouchers. In polls of the public, most people are not thrilled to have their tax money go to parochial institutions. I do think that should be kept in mind. But maybe even more important, the parochial and private schools are not in the charters. They're not held to the same standards. So for example, they don't have to take an IEP student. The publics, we take cheerfully, everyone. And the other issue, one reason that they don't take students is that the state has not been able to properly support, particularly students with disabilities. And so almost every school in the state has a special education budget deficit. So for logical reasons, most of the privates won't or don't have to serve all the students who may be approaching them. I can tell you that if students fall too far behind in the privates, they get kicked out. And, typically if they're caught with substances that are not legal, they get kicked out. Publics really don't do that. So I would say if we're going to fund them, then we have to have the same expectations as far as performance. I would like to echo what everyone else has said here. I appreciate everybody taking an hour and a half out of their Saturdays. I appreciate the service that all of you put in. I know most of you get paid, but it's not enough. I don't, I might point out. But I do appreciate everyone's willingness to have civil conversations and be able to discuss and listen to other people's perspectives. I too am very proud to live in Urbandale and to serve the public schools. I think, as Bob Brownell said, we're really fortunate. We're in a very good place historically moving forward. I'm thrilled with people, the communities moving toward common water provisions. I think there's some remarkable innovation going on all over the metro. So I'm really proud of the metro and of our state. And I do agree that things are more on the up. Again, I look back at last year at this time, and I think that's valuable. It's way better. With that, thanks again. We'll see everybody in a month. Thanks, EJ. You did an awesome job as always.
Thank you. And we wind up, I think every time I sit through one of these, I say to myself that, again, how fortunate we are to have folks who are as diligent and responsible as all of you are. So on behalf of the chamber and frankly, everybody in the community, thanks for all you do. Just keep doing it because of the way you do it. And we appreciate that. So thank you and enjoy the weekend.